What is up, guys? Wraec is here with a new video, and today we got news from The Age, posted by Marpi here in the Posts channel of Idle Heroes. And I made the video about this, and then he released an updated version. Yeah, great. Well, so we now do a video about this, which is alright as well. If you want to find this is a poll, so you can vote on this. As you can see below, I like Osis nerf, I don't like Osis nerf, I like his Ebos buff, I don't like his Ebos buff. And you can vote on this, is discord.gg/idleheroes. You can find it in game. If you go to your settings, there's actually a link to this Discord as well. And there's a polls channel, and I definitely recommend you vote on this. Maybe after you watch this video, I want to tell you my opinion about it. Basically, a little bit of history before we really start. Last season was the first season of Star Expedition where we had DGN, and she absolutely murdered everything, which was not expected by The Age. And we talked about it a little bit before. The ability that was a little bit, well broken, or behaving unintendedly, we should say it like that. That was her Bright Blessing ability. And if we check that out in game, that's actually a passive too. Undying Shadow is granted to the enemy with the highest attack, Bright Blessing to the ally with the highest attack. And if we check that out, then we see her basic skill replicates 2 random attribute buffs from self to allies with Bright Blessing. So, which is the hero with the highest attack on your team. And this is no problem as long as the hero isn't herself. But once the hero is herself, you get an exponential growth of the stacks of those buffs. So if you have 3 all damage dealt buffs, and she replicates those to an ally, that ally will have 3 all damage dealt buffs. If she does that the next turn and still has 3 all damage dealt buffs, this ally will have 6 all damage buffs. It's a linear growth, because the growth rate is the same every single round. What happens though if she herself is the target of a buff replication? Well, she has 3 all damage dealt buffs, replicates those, then she has 6. Next turn, she replicates the buffs she has herself, which are then 6, so she gains 6 buffs, bringing her to 12. Next round after that, 12, 24, 48, and so on. And that, of course, escalated to her having thousands of buffs in the end. And yeah, if those buffs are the buffs of Osis, those last forever, those don't run out, so let's check them out. So, Osis buffs, when anyone dies in battle, increases all allies attack by 10%, holy damage by 10%, all damage dealt by 10%, crit by 20% for 15 rounds, which of course meant 5 carries were often used together with DGN, so you have 5 heroes on your team that can die, and well, then you have attack buffs that last for the entire fight, all damage dealt, holy damage, some really juicy targets for this buff replication. And if you could get like the all damage buff to 1000% and maybe the attack buff as well, or 1000 stacks, that is absolutely insane. And that ended up really granting her the ability to murder those bosses, which is insane. Definitely, it was insane. And I was opposing this. I didn't really want that. I said, okay, maybe the easiest way to fix that, because it is only broken as long as she replicates the buff she has to herself. Let's just make it so Bright Blessing can only be granted to an ally, not to herself. And some people were opposing this. They said like, okay, no, really don't want that, because we want to keep this DGN strategy alive. We want to keep this DGN strategy now free to play, can finally do damage, which is apparently The Age is not on that side. That much I can say. The Age really wants to gut out this strategy. They really don't want DGN to be a damage dealer anymore, or to be used in any effective manner. Their first approach to this apparently here is Osis buff being nerfed, which I don't think, I saw that before we know what exactly was the nerf, and I said, oh well, that's really bad. Looking at that, I mean, it's not that horrible. It is not that great either, because, well, it is certainly a nerf. We can see the difference here. Attack 10%, holy damage 10%, all damage dealt 10%, crit 20%, and now we have all damage dealt 25%, which is of course a higher value. Crit still 20% and crit damage 30%. You will cap out on crit in turn 1 when you have 5 carries with you. You will also cap out on crit damage in turn 1 when you have 5 carries with you. So really you only gain 25% all damage dealt, as opposed to 10% attack, 10% holy damage, 10% all damage dealt. It is better to get multiple buffs of different kind, because those will multiplicate with each other. The holy damage will buff the 10% attack as well, because the holy damage is based on the attack that you have. So if the attack gets higher because you have a buff, that will also make the holy damage that you deal higher. And the all damage dealt, of course, as well. So those are not just 30%. As they multiply with each other, the difference is actually much larger. So the 25% all damage dealt are indeed a nerf. Are they a big nerf? I would say maybe 30-40%, something like that. Probably. So not a small one at all. Not a small nerf at all. Then again, we get crit damage, so we can compensate a little bit for it by not really needing to invest into crit or crit damage at all. So that's a little bit of something. I would say maybe 30%. I didn't calculate that. Probably Ica will maybe make a post or something. And then you can see that for yourself. For myself, I think it's unnecessary. It's just unnecessary. Most people that use Osis use it in early game, very early game, when you have 1 or 2 Transcendence heroes, and well, let them use that, it's alright. It's not overpowered, they don't do insane damage, it's just a nice, convenient way for them to deal damage. And that is alright. Let them use it. It was never OP, it was never like, well, Jesus is here, or I for myself used that to deal Star Expedition damage. It's just not the case. That was just the case when we got DGN, and we already talked about it. I for myself think if she can't target herself, that is no problem, then we don't need to nerf Osis. But that is not the worst part in my opinion. You can be on either side here. I don't really think it's necessary to nerf it. It's just, I think people that want this to be nerfed do it because they don't use Osis. And they want to get around any other nerf. So like if Osis is nerfed, well then we don't really have to buff the SE boss, neither do we have to nerf DGN. So I think that's the idea here, but some people can be a different opinion there. Then SE boss, and that is the horrible part that we want to talk about. Passive skill at the end of each round removes 1 random attribute buff from 2 random enemies. Passive skill at the end of each round reduces the energy of the enemy with the highest attack by 100. Afterwards removes 1 random attribute buff from all enemies. So this is a buff on 2 levels, which was not really clearly displayed before. Because before it said end of each round clear 1 random buff from 2 random enemy heroes. This is way more insane than what they said before. I have no idea why. At the end of each round, removes 1 random attribute buff from 2 random enemies. First thing we have to note, at the end of each round, which means if you run DGN team, all of your carries are dead, you have DGN on the board, she will get hit by this. So at that point, we don't know if it's going to remove 2 random buffs or just 1, because there's 2 random enemies. Sometimes that means it needs to be 2 different enemies, so that would be something we would need to test, but just thinking about it, well, let's just say it's just 1 buff from that passive skill. Well, that's horrible. That's really horrible. If you try to use the Osis strat now, with the nerfed Osis, by the way, well, as soon as this hits your all damage dealt buff, your damage is dead. But also with the unnerfed Osis, honestly, that would probably be enough to end this strategy, because you just needed to hit holy damage once, you needed to hit all damage dealt, and then maybe attack or something. It would probably hit all of your buffs at least once during a fight, and that will destroy your replication, and then you will end up doing very low damage, because you need to get those really high replications at the end. Those jumps from 500 to 1000 stacks that give you 500 stacks at the end, those are the ones that really give you the huge damage. If you don't get those, then there is no damage for you, so you will likely end up doing very bad damage. And I said, oh well, before we saw the full skill, well, that can be pretty bad if you run like the regular team with LFA or Ferric Investor as well, and you have the damage to poison target buffs from MFF, for example, which was one of the huge increases in damage we had in Star Expedition. And that gets removed on like turn 12. That will really, really lower your damage and can be really quite insane. Or on LFA, he has attack steal, but that in itself is a debuff for the boss, but it also grants him an attack buff in the of the amount of attack that he has stolen. If that gets removed on a high round, well, that will really, really hurt him as well. And that was bad even before we saw that the other ability here is also buffed. Afterwards, it removes one random attribute buff from all enemies. So there isn't even like this point where you say, oh, it's a chance that LFA just won't get hit. No, he will get hit. Every single round, he will get hit. And this is just gutting out the damage of all teams in Star Expedition. Which I know why they do it. They do it because last time we ended Star Expedition and we got to the last boss, or the iOS guild got to the last boss, and they were like, yeah, great, we're done. And DH is now like, oh, they're done with our game mode. Well, that's bad. We didn't really expect that. And instead of finding a creative, well, I don't want to say instead of finding a creative solution, but that's certainly a creative solution, and making maybe those bosses more difficult, or just introducing a few extra bosses. Why not? It's alright. Introducing divine power to those bosses, something like that. Doesn't really matter. Anything that is cool. They just nuke our damage. This is a nuke on our damage. You will go into the next Star Expedition if this is live, and you will do sometimes 60 to 80% less damage. You will have a huge variance in your damage because, well, on one fight, your LFA might not get hit with any insane removed buffs as well. Some unimportant buffs. Maybe you have a heal effect buff or something that gets removed. Doesn't really matter. And then you deal high damage. You might as well deal as much damage as before. It is certainly possible, though unlikely. And then on the next fight, he gets hit all the time, and you do E plus 14 damage with a team that used to do like 2E plus 16 or something. And that's no fun at all. That's just gambling at this point and hoping that your LFA doesn't get hit. There's nothing you can do about it. It just makes all bosses way more difficult. You will do way less damage. There will be the moments where you thought you improved your team a lot, but through sheer RNG, your team just doesn't do any damage at all. There's no real sense to target that. You can't really work around it at all because, well, at least the second ability hits all enemies. There is nothing gameplay-wise that you can do and just lower your damage. So then you have lower damage. And I don't think that's fun. I think the fun in Star Expedition, especially for the people that are passionate about it, is in constantly improving their damage. If it is the whale method of buying like an S tier SQH, or just that what everybody can do by just improving their attack a little. Or just getting better stats, maybe getting a hammer and getting a nice roll on your LFA. It doesn't really matter, something like this. And you just want to see that next time you can deal more damage. And maybe you got a great roll, you got an awakening and got your B tier LFA or something, when before you had a C tier. And now you're waiting for the next Star Expedition season, happily waiting for the moment when you can try that new copy of the LFA. That isn't even a whale thing, that is something that all players share. And I think now going ahead and saying, nah, we will really destroy your damage, that just feels bad. And I can't imagine that people won't quit about this. If you are passionate about Star Expedition and DH just comes around and says, oh no, now your damage is dead, and we take away your toy in this sense, I don't think people will like that. Personally, I don't really appreciate it at all. For myself, I'm not into that Star Expedition stuff that much. Let's be real. I was into it quite a lot, but somehow that went away. I don't know. But the community speaks quite clearly below here. That was before, was 4327. Now we're already on 825,630. So they are opposing this. They don't like the Osis nerf. They don't like the Ebos buff. DH kind of ruled out to change DGN, which I thought was quite strange. I asked Chen, which is a community manager, about this, and he said like, well, we don't want to change DGN outside of Star Expedition, so we have to change Star Expedition, which was weird to me in a way, because I for myself think that well, changing DGN has the smaller impact, especially if you do like a nerf that I suggested. That is certainly not something that will have big impact on a lot of strategies. And you have to keep in mind, DGN is dead in Star Expedition, no matter what. DH wants to get rid of her, and they will get rid of her some way or the other. So it's not really a discussion at this point about keeping DGN for Star Expedition and, well, in that strategy that we talked about. It is more about how they remove it. And I don't think this is the way to do it. I would much rather say see the way that I suggested. Well, obviously, I guess that's the thing with all suggestions that you make yourself. But we can have a discussion about that. Maybe you write that in the comments. I'm pretty sure, as with the last video, a lot of people are against DGN. Well, that is no longer really the topic for this, I fear. We are past that at this point. Still, make sure you go to discord.gg/idleheroes. Find it under the settings in your game as well. And make sure you go to the polls section and you vote on this, whatever your opinion is. Also make sure you comment under this video. And while you're on the way, also subscribe. And with that, I wish you guys a great day. And we'll see us in the next one.